Hello and welcome to Magic is Real. I'm Shannon Torrance. I'm your host. I'm a psychic medium, and I'm also a soul living in a human body. And today I have with me Aaron Thomas Green, who is a brilliant engineer living in Virginia, where I have spent a lot of my time. And he is here to share with us the story of his early near death experience, the insights that he's gleaned, and all about his spiritual journey. So, welcome, Aaron, and thank you so much for taking time to be with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure. So, let's start, Aaron, by your near death experience happened when you were 6 years old. So,
Yeah,
normally I ask people, what was your life like before then? You were a kid, but
right.
did you remember having any kind of spiritual beliefs, or what kind of family did you grow up in? Anything you're comfortable sharing with what was happening in your life when this happened to you?
Sure. So, uh, right now, I work as an engineer. I'm married with three kids and a dog. Um, I live a pretty normal suburban lifestyle as a dad. Um, my near death experience happened when I was 6 years old, or shortly before my sixth birthday. And at the time, I was just a kid. Um, my parents, my mom's a nurse, my dad's a college professor, and we had a pretty, I guess, normal suburban lifestyle. uh I was playing with some friends in a neighbor's backyard, and um back then we didn't have computers and cell phones and TV and all that stuff, so we just kind of roamed the neighborhood in large groups of children. And I was playing in the neighbor's backyard, and for whatever reason I couldn't breathe. We had been doing everything, just having a good time, and for some reason I couldn't take a breath. I couldn't breathe no matter what I did. Um, and as I struggled to breathe, I started walking away from my friends and trying to go back uh, to home. And as I was walking away, something happened. This breathing trouble uh, triggered my soul to leave my body. It wasn't like I passed out. I just straight left my body, and I was floating there, and I could see my body fall to the ground, and it was obvious immediately that I was more than just this physical body that I've been riding around in for 6 years. And I looked back at my friends, and everything that had been happening seemed so important. Now it kind of seemed like trivial, like completely unimportant. And almost immediately my life flashed before me. I relived my entire life, those 6 years, in extreme detail. Um, only the only difference was, not only did I re-experience everything that I had been through over those 6 years, but I could also literally feel what my parents had been through, like what I had, how I had affected them. I could feel their love, their frustrations, all of that during those 6 years. And a couple of things really stood out. One was, my mom loved me, and that really stood out as like it was important, like it really mattered. Like somehow it made a difference in the world, that love that she had for me. And then also I could feel my father's frustration of changing diapers, having a crying baby. Those frustrations really, like I could feel that. um, and it really felt like those 6 years was very short, and like I really hadn't done anything in 6 years of life. 6 years, it felt like a really long time as a kid, but there, as a soul, floating outside of my body, it didn't feel long at all. It felt extremely short. Anyway, when that was over, I noticed a bright light in the distance, and I looked at the light, and I knew that I instinctively knew there was something really important about this light, but I didn't go towards it or anything. I didn't really spend a lot of time uh, thinking about this light. I just shifted my attention back to what I was doing floating there. And I started to have questions. I would question what had happened or what was going on. And when I had a question, it was like an answer came to me very clearly. And oftentimes the answer would come in the form of a spiritual memory. It was like a very detailed um, re-experiencing of something that I knew I had experienced prior to becoming Aaron, prior to beginning this life. And one of the first questions I had was, um, what am I? I knew I wasn't this physical body that I'd been living in. I knew I was fundamentally something different. And um, here on Earth, we just see what's in front of us. But as a spirit, I could kind of see things in more detail and from a different perspective. I wasn't limited the way that we are in these bodies, and I could see like the entirety of my spiritual shape, what I look like in that form. And anyway, I existed as a round orb of consciousness. Um, there was a faint light coming from within me, but um, to me at the time, it resembled kind of an egg, just a round orb, kind of simple looking, but there was definitely a light coming from within that was noticeable, and that seemed important. Anyway, once I realized that that's what I appeared like, I started having further questions, and I wanted to know, where did I begin? Where did I start from? I knew that Aaron Green, like that wasn't my beginning. That I existed before that, and so this memory replayed something that I'd been through previously but had forgotten. And I started out as um, a soul, kind of like that round orb, with hundreds or thousands of other souls. We all existed together in this happy place. It was like a sea of light. It was very bright, and we were all happy and content. We just existed with each other, and there was no problems, and nothing could ever go wrong. We were we were happy and safe and content, and it was a nice simple existence. And I knew that I had access to more information and intelligence, and that there was, uh, you know, uh, there was more to my existence than just being that simple orb. But I didn't have any reason to do anything or push my limits, because we were all so content. We were just happy just to stay there forever. And periodically, a gift would come down, and there would be one for each of these souls. And to me, as a kid, thinking about it, I thought of it like a cookie. It was like a simple gift that everyone wanted, and we were all happy to get these gifts. Well, one time these gifts came down, and there was one fewer gift than there were souls in this group. And I made the conscious decision that I was going to pass on this gift so that all those around me, that they could get a gift and enjoy that gift. And when the last gift came down, and the last soul took it, I was very gently lifted up out of this sea of souls by a much stronger um, entity or mind. It was obviously very powerful, but at the same time extremely gentle and careful with how I was lifted out of this group. And it contacted me like mind to mind communication. It wasn't verbal; it was like a direct link to my mind, and I could tell that it was a very powerful and very loving entity that was contacting me. And um, essentially, this entity said that it was God, that it was my creator, and I'll just call it God for simplicity's sake. And that what I had done was very important. That giving up something that I wanted to benefit those around me was really important, and it meant that I was ready to begin some kind of process. And I was like, okay, I didn't have any knowledge or experience, so I just accepted everything that God told me. And essentially, God said that there was a wonderful existence in store for me and for all these other souls. But in order to really fully appreciate what was in store for us, we needed to go through some kind of experience that would allow us to grow, and um, it would basically facilitate us becoming the kind of souls we needed to be so that we could enjoy what God had in store for us. Essentially, God was very loving and kind and compassionate and honest and nice, just wonderful, extremely loving, and extremely powerful. And in order for us to really enjoy everything that God had prepared for us, we needed to freely choose to be loving, kind, compassionate, honest. We needed to freely uh, develop along those lines, those same traits that God has, in order to enjoy everything that God had in store for us. And I asked God, couldn't you just change us and make us like that? Like, why do we need to go through this long process? And God said, yes, absolutely. God could change us and make us like that, but that we were created with free will, and that free will was extremely important. We weren't created to be mindless, to do exactly what God wanted. We were created deliberately so that we could make our own choices. And that was like a key part of our creation. It was very important that God, being all powerful and fully capable of doing anything to us, yet at the same time, God was extremely respectful of us as entities and our ability and right to make our own choices. And so to forcibly change us to make us how we needed to be would violate that core concept of our creation. And I said, okay, that sounds reasonable. And God basically said, are you willing to go through this difficult journey? You'll be able to get all your difficulties out of the way very quickly, and then you can enjoy your existence. And I agreed. Yes, I was willing to go through it. God was extremely pleased with me and loved me very much, and was um, certain that this was a good plan. The confidence that God had in this plan was very palpable. You could feel that confidence, and it really came across. And anyway, before I was going to go on this journey, God asked if I wanted to see His face, and I said sure, okay. And so my attention was shifted. I had been looking at all these souls that I had been with, and my attention was shifted around, and I was facing a huge sun-like entity, um, with millions and millions of souls like mixed in with this entity. It looked like the sun, except it was made up of millions of these little souls, and each soul had their own light that they generated and contributed to the overall um, effect of this very bright sun-like entity. And some of these souls came to the surface to wish me well, and I could see their faces very clearly. And they were extremely, extremely happy, much, much happier than these souls I had been with, these simple souls as I started out. And the souls, they understood exactly where, what I was, that I was beginning this process, and they came to wish me well, and they said that when I was ready, that I would join them, that eventually I would get through what I needed to get through, and that I would come and join them, and that um, somehow I would add something that would increase their happiness. So they were excited that I was going to join them because there was something that I had that nobody else had. Like, each soul is irreplaceable and individual, and each soul adds something slightly different that no other soul could replicate. And so they were excited that that I was starting out, and it meant that eventually I would come back and join them. And with that, they wished me well on my journey, and God asked if I was sure I was ready, and I agreed. And then with that, it's like I was speeding quickly uh, to some other place, and we God was still like communicating with me, mind to mind communication, and we looked at, I guess, thousands and thousands of different places I could go. These were like different planets that I could possibly come to, and it was up to me to choose which planet I wanted to go to. And um, after seeing many thousands, and the net effect of the life would be the same. You would get the experience you need, and then you could go back to your spiritual home where you ultimately would end up. And it wasn't really critically important which of these planets I went to. They would all accomplish the same goal of giving me the kind of experiences I need. And anyway, there was something about Earth that when I saw Earth, I was absolutely positive that this is where I want it to be. This was the place for me. I was completely sure about it, and I don't know why, but there's something about it that it just felt perfect. And God asked if I was sure. Are you sure that you want to go to this planet? And I agreed. I said, yes, I'm sure. This is where I want to go. And with that, the this memory ended, and I was still just floating there next to my body in my neighbor's backyard, kind of looking around. I noticed there was a couple of things that really stood out, just floating around there. One was that time didn't flow the same way that we're used to it here on Earth as people. There was like a fundamental difference to the flow of time that I could feel, and it was like I was in a parallel realm to this physical realm we're in. I don't know how to describe it, but I think a parallel realm is the best I could come up with. A plane of existence that's not quite in this physical plane, but it's kind of like close to it. Anyway, I had another question as I floated there. I wanted to know, how did I become Aaron Green? Like, why am I living this life as this person? And again, this spiritual memory came to me, and it replayed in extreme detail something that I'd previously been through and had forgotten about as I was, living as Aaron Green. Anyway, it started. I was with some guides, and these guides had lived on Earth before, and they were helping me choose this upcoming life that I was going to experience. They were uh, helping with some of the details, and essentially, it was up to me as a soul to help pick what kind of what body I was going to go into. And the guides had this one body kind of picked for me that they thought would be a good fit. And this person was an extremely angry person. I think there was something about the childhood that was difficult, and I would have grown into a really angry person, and that would have been like a dominant part of my life is just dealing with anger. And I completely rejected this life. I was like, no, I'm not going to live this life. I just totally rejected it. And the guides respected my choice. It was my choice because I was going to live that life, and they completely respected it. And we looked at another life I could live. There was these parents who I think lived nearby, and they were going to have another child, and I could become one of their children. And so we started looking at what kind of children they could have. And after seeing this really angry person, I was concerned. It was like I didn't want to hurt anybody. Like that was really important to me. And I felt like being a girl would make it less likely for me to hurt other people. And so I really wanted to be a girl. And I saw that these parents could have a redheaded child. And it was just obvious that somehow all this information was available to me, and it was obvious that a red hair was kind of rare. It's like a rare hair color in the world, and that really appealed to me. I really liked the idea of having this unusual hair color, and I wanted to be a girl because I didn't want to hurt anybody, and I felt like I was less likely to hurt people if I was a girl. So I wanted to be a redheaded girl, and even though these parents had those genes available to them, that I could be a redheaded girl, there was something about my soul and the limitations of those genes. Somehow I would have been like an awkward person. I would have had difficulty relating to other people, and I never would have gotten married. It would have I would have been kind of like socially awkward, and I would have trouble meeting men and getting married and having children. And so that was kind of a deal breaker for me because I wanted to have children. And so we started to look at the boys, and I still wanted to be redheaded, but we were looking at the boys available to them. And somehow there was even fewer options for redheaded boys than there had been for redheaded girls. And it just wasn't the right fit. I could have been a redheaded boy from them, but somehow all the other characteristics just weren't right. And it wasn't going to work. So we started looking at brown haired boys, and these parents that I was looking at, they had tons and tons of options available for brown haired boys. If I chose a brown haired boy, then all kinds of other options were available about other details that were important. And so the guides and I started looking at that, and I wanted to be like a really really good looking guy, like the best looking guy on the planet, kind of good looking. the kind of guy you see on the cover of a magazine or whatever. And that was available to these parents. And I could have made that choice, but the guides pointed out, they were like, where you are spiritually, um, if you choose this really really good looking guy, there's going to be opportunities available to you. Women are going to treat you differently, and essentially I would have ended up being too promiscuous. And the spiritual downsides of being overly promiscuous were kind of like self-evident at that point, and I knew that that wasn't the right choice for me. That I didn't want to deal with the spiritual downsides associated with being too promiscuous. And so instead, I reduced the the attractiveness down to something that I considered to be attractive, but nothing extraordinary. You know, a decent looking guy. Okay. I'm almost 50, so maybe that's not the case anymore. But as a younger guy, I was decent looking. But anyway, that's what I picked. Attractive, but not the best looking guy on the planet. And then we started looking at intelligence, and I wanted to be like the most intelligent guy on the planet. Like an Aristotle or an Albert Einstein, just really really intelligent. And these parents had those genes available. I could have made that choice, but the guides helped point out that I would be extremely arrogant if I was one of the smartest guys on the planet. I would look down on other people. I would be kind of a little bit of a jerk. um, I would have a lot of trouble with all these, being surrounded by all these dumb people, compared to me. And um, and I would also become an atheist, and all of that was a deal breaker for me. I didn't that wasn't what I was looking for in life. That wasn't good for my spiritual development. And so likewise, just like with looks, I backed down the intelligence to a smart person, but nothing, no Einstein, nothing at that level. And when I arrived at the intelligence that I thought was good for me, we were like, okay, that looks good, and that's what I picked. And then, I it's safe to say I knew everything about this body that I was getting myself into, down to the most intimate detail. We looked at everything, even like the kind of clothing that I would wear as a person. We looked at all of it, and it matched what I was looking for. And the guides, basically, when I had picked the body, the guides had some plans for my life, some stuff that was going to happen to me. They showed me that I was going to have my nose broken, and that would be difficult, and I needed to agree to that in order for it to happen. And so we looked at what that would be like, and how difficult it would be for me. And I agreed to that experience. Even though it would be difficult, it would help me in my spiritual progression. It would help me to, I guess, evolve spiritually into the kind of soul that I want it to be. And they showed me that I would dislocate my shoulder, and that would be difficult. And then they showed me that I would dislocate and break my other shoulder, and that would be even more difficult. And we looked at the medical technology and what was available, and it was obvious that the doctors would be able to fix this shoulder. And it's kind of funny that from that perspective, it seemed like Earth technology was so primitive. It just seemed ridiculously, uh, kind of like we're in the Stone Ages type of thing. Anyway, but it was obvious that the doctors would be able to fix that shoulder. And then they showed me some stuff that was planned for me with other people. There was like agreements being made between different people. Some really some situations that as people you'd say, wow, that's really screwed up. But some of that stuff was planned out, and it was part of a deeper plan. And I needed to agree to some of those events that were planned out. And other people, they were involved in agreeing to some of these arrangements also. And it was like if anything was beyond a certain level of difficulty, I had to agree to it in order for it to happen in my life. And so I agreed to some physical problems, and then some issues in life that were going to that were going to happen. They were part of a bigger plan. And after we had all this planned out, I took another look at the parents. I knew on Earth we have secrets, and there's stuff about you I don't know, and you don't know stuff about me. But as a spirit looking at these parents, like I knew everything about them. They didn't have anything hidden from me. I knew where they were on their spiritual journey. I knew what kind of stuff they thought about, what kind of people they were, what kind of parents they would be. I knew that I would have this older brother, and what our relationship would be like. Like all of that was shown to me, and I did, and it all seemed acceptable to me. And but the guides pointed out, hey, if you become this person, your father has some anger issues. He has a bit of a temper, and we took a closer look at that. And basically, I felt like the positives of this father outweighed the negatives of his anger problems, and I was, I felt like he was still the right father for me. And so when we looked at the whole life, what it would be like to live as this person and some of the stuff that was planned for my life, the guides asked me kind of like a final time, are you sure you're willing to do this? Are you sure, after all these decisions that we've made, are you sure that you'll go through with this? And I agreed that yes, I was willing to go through with it. And with that, it's like the decision was made, and I was able to witness the conception of the body. And I don't mean like the physical act of my parents. I mean on the spiritual perspective, what it's like from a spiritual side when this new body is being formed. And it was really beautiful. It was a spiritually significant event that this new body is being formed that I was going to live as. And I'm not sure how to explain it, only that it was beautiful and spiritually significant. Anyway, with that, the memory was over, and I was back to kind of floating around next to my body. And I had another question. I wanted to know, okay, eventually souls leave these bodies. What happens to them? What's their experience life like when they leave Earth? And I was shown a number of different scenarios or situations that souls who had previously lived on Earth, like how they were, what their existence was like after they left Earth. And first, we saw this really horrible place, or realm, I guess is what it was. And these souls that had previously lived on Earth, they looked like hideous monsters, and they were fighting with each other constantly. They were very angry, and they just wanted to kill each other. Like that was the kind of people that they were. And they continued to be that kind of soul even when they left their body. And their whole existence was just a horrible battle of trying to hurt each other, and they were all just miserable. It was just awful. But as they were fighting with each other, one of them like stopped fighting with the others and actually tried to help one of the other souls that was there. And when this soul tried to help its neighbor, it was like an angel or a being of light who had been up above, just monitoring the situation. As soon as that soul tried to help someone else, the angel zoomed down and lifted the soul out of that group. And I was told that when that when that soul made the decision to help somebody and stop fighting, it no longer belonged there. And that, like, God had a way that soul could continue to progress. Like, none of these souls were stuck there forever, and that all of them would eventually choose of their own free will to stop fighting with each other. And then I was shown this other place or realm where there was a lot of souls just kind of, it was dark, and these souls were confused, and they were just kind of wandering around. um, they were unhappy, but they weren't miserable. They were just kind of lost and confused. And I remember there was a lady there that was just screaming all kinds of profanity, and the profanity that she used was way worse than profanity on Earth. There's somehow it. Uh, I don't even understand how this was, but it was just way worse than the worst profanity you'd ever hear on Earth. But anyway, there was some like higher level souls or beings of light. These were people who had previously lived on Earth, and they were like in a much happier realm, but they came down to this lower level realm to try to help the souls that were there. And the souls that were there that were lost and confused, they were mistrustful. Like they had a really hard time. It was like they weren't trying to help anybody else, and so for them, the idea that someone else was there to help them was a foreign concept. So they had a really hard time accepting the help from others, just because the idea of helping someone else was it's like it didn't jive with their the way they approached others. But anyway, one of the souls eventually agreed to accept this help, and when it agreed to accept the help, these higher level souls took it away, and they had a way that this soul could continue to progress, to move on to happier realms. I saw another place that was kind of like Earth, that they had buildings and roads, and they were all kind of like ugly buildings. It didn't look quite right, and the souls there lived kind of similar to how they'd lived on Earth, but they were unhappy, and it was kind of a dark place. And again, there was like higher level souls there trying to help these unhappy souls, but they couldn't force them to leave this place. The souls that were there had to agree to go with them. It was their choice. But again, another one of these souls, I witnessed it accept the help of these higher level kind of like beings of light that were there to help. And again, that soul, there was like a way for it to continue to move upward. It wasn't stuck in that place forever. And then I saw another place that was kind of like Earth, but it had beautiful buildings. I remember looking at a lamppost that was there in this building, very similar to what you would see on Earth. And the roads were pretty, and the people there were really happy. Everybody was living kind of like they lived on Earth, but they were really happy, and it was a beautiful place. And then I saw this other, even higher level city of light, I guess I would call it. It was like an entire city where the buildings and the souls there, they were all translucent and made of light, and all of it together created this an entire city of light. Everything in the city, you could kind of like see into it and through it, and it all had a light of its own. And so the whole city glowed, um, and it was really really beautiful. And the beings there, the souls there, they were really really happy, extremely happy. And then, as I'd mentioned previously, the souls that I had seen with God, they were ridiculously happy. Like there's just not even words to describe how happy they are. Um, anyway, when I'd seen when I had re-experienced seeing these places that I'd seen previously, I was back to just kind of floating in my neighbor's backyard, kind of wandering around aimlessly. And as I was just kind of floating around, this being of light or angel, I don't know what it was, but it was like a very high level uh, soul or angel. It came at me very very quickly and said, and communicated to me, like mind to mind communication, you are not to leave your body. It was kind of like I had done something wrong, like this breathing difficulty I had. It should not have triggered my soul to leave my body. And in like an instant, it was like I was back in my body, and I stood up, and I no longer had a breathing trouble. I could breathe fine at this point. And my brother, who had been playing with me and this other group of friends, by that point in time, by that point he had noticed that my body was just laying there for maybe about 30 seconds. He was coming over to check on me to see what had happened. And when I stood up, he turned around and he went back to play with the friends. And I went home and tried to explain it to my mom, but there's no way as a 6 year old I could have explained this to her. And I basically gave up trying. And I would think about this experience daily for maybe 6 months, trying to understand what I had seen. I was a little bit fixated on it. I was trying to comprehend everything that had happened and all this different stuff I'd seen. And maybe about 6 months after this experience happened, these these same guides that I had communicated with to plan out my life, they communicated with me. It was like a mind to mind communication, and I knew exactly who it was. There was no confusion about who it was. I knew exactly who it was, and they basically communicated that this experience that I had gone through, it was causing trouble in my life. It was kind of like messing up the plan, and it was I wasn't able to live life as life was intended because of all this information, all this stuff I had seen. And essentially they wanted to hide this experience from me. And I remember asking, well, don't you want people to know about, God and all this stuff? It seems to me like you want people to know this. And they said, yes, we do want people to know about God, but um, the experience that you've had will prevent you from ever developing faith, because you've seen God, so you can't ever have faith in God, because it's like you've already experienced this. And part of living life is not to have that knowledge. Uh, somehow, like, faith was really important, and I asked them to explain it. Like, I didn't understand what they meant, and they explained it, but I couldn't comprehend their explanation. It was too much for me. um, so I told them I didn't understand, and they said, look, all you need to know is faith is important, and we want to hide these memories, but when you're older you'll get these memories back. And so I agreed to it, and the memories were hidden from me, and I didn't think about this experience anymore as I grew up. I got older. When I was 12, I got in a fight, and this kid broke my nose, and that was very difficult to go through. And I had a black eye in middle school for a couple of weeks, and everyone in the school knew what had happened. It was a big incident, a big mess. But I got through it, but I had no idea that I had agreed to go through that experience. No idea at all. And then when I was older, I dislocated my shoulder, and it got better. It wasn't a big deal. I got married, had kids, and then maybe 12 years ago, I broke and dislocated this shoulder, and had surgery, and they were able to fix it, and my shoulder is pretty good now, so I'm happy about that. But I had no idea that I had agreed to any of this stuff um, before, before I was even born. And about 12 years ago, I was reading a magazine article about a guy named Eben Alexander. He's a neurosurgeon who had a near-death experience. And anyway, this magazine article was written about him, and I read this magazine article, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. Like, I believed what he was saying. I believed his account of his near-death experience, and somehow, me accepting his experience, it's like I believed in God at a higher level. I accepted what he was saying is true. I guess my faith was higher than it had been previously. I'm not exactly sure, but somehow it triggered all these memories to come back to me, and all these memories that had been basically blocked since I was 6 came back to me. And I've spent the last 12 years or so thinking about this experience, trying to understand it and make sense of it. And now, I'm just here sharing it with you.
Wow, thank you so much. That's such a detailed near-death experience, and you answered all of my questions, actually, so now I'm trying to think of more, because one of the things I wanted to say is how profound it is that at 6 years old, we're smart, but we still don't have this total understanding of
Right.
everything.
Right.
And so to have such a detailed near-death experience, it kind of shows, for example, as a medium, people will sometimes ask me, well, what if my grandfather spoke a different language? Will you
Right.
still be able to understand them? And I say, yeah, because they're speaking telepathically. They're showing
Right.
me symbols that I understand.
Yeah.
As a 6-year-old, even though your awareness of all things, the world that we live in, might have been a bit immature, the fact is that you were still able to be exposed to these very profound, uh, like this level of intelligence that you were able to comprehend, even as a 6-year-old, because
Right.
your soul has no age.
Yeah. When I was outside of that 6-year-old body, I was way more intelligent and aware, and more me than I am as a person, if that makes sense. It was so much more real and more vivid than this day-to-day life. It's really remarkable, and I could comprehend way more as a soul than I ever could as a person.
Right, and I know that you did forget for a while, and I was gonna ask you that because how does a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old carry that around with them? So it
Right,
makes sense that they would have you forget, but at the same time, the fact that you can remember it in such vivid detail, to me is one of the most compelling arguments for near-death experiences not being a chemical reaction in your brain, but
right,
being an actual experience because I remember being 6 vaguely. I remember a lot of little things, but I'm not sure in what order. It's not very
right,
clear. But you have this very, sequential memory of everything that happened, as do many, many near-death experiencers. It's not
right,
just you. Did you start to remember it piecemeal, or did it flood in all at once when you finally remembered?
right. I would say about half of it was kind of like right away, and then the other half it was more of a piecemeal as time went on, and I was thinking about it. It's like more and more. I remembered more and more pieces. Um, but yeah, I realized that most people don't remember a whole lot about their childhood. But I think I remember my childhood better than most people. But then also this experience was really, even though it happened when I was 6, it was like those memories were from when I was 35. So
Mhm.
it's kind of a different memory, a little bit of a different mechanism or sequence than what most people go through.
Yeah, it's a different context too, because now
Yeah,
as an adult, you can sort of understand it better. Was your I
yeah,
assume your parents still with us
yes,
now? Yeah, I had that feeling because 'cause I'm a medium and I was like, his parents are both here. But when you remembered all of this, did you go back and talk to your mother about it and tell
yes.
her?
I've told both my parents about it, and
Did she
they
remember you speaking about it when you were a kid?
no, no,
Oh,
not at all.
she didn't. So
No.
what was their what did they think about it?
Um, they were a little perplexed, I think, but they've I think they accept that I had this experience, and they understand it. They've certainly heard about other people having these kind of experiences, so I think that helps. Um, you know, I, I'm not the only guy saying this kind of stuff. Lots of people have this kind of experience, and I think they accept the stuff I'm saying, even though it's a little different than the dogma that they've learned in church.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think they accept what I'm saying.
Right. And earlier I was saying to you that I always love hearing these stories from people that are typically more scientific, logical thinkers. You're an engineer,
Right.
and you have to have a logical, analytical brain to be able to be an engineer. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you mentioned that. Well, actually, I don't know exactly how you worded it, but I want to know how does having had this experience and this understanding of what's really happening in the world
Mhm.
I guess, affected your work or vice versa? Like, does it at all change the way that you approach, the logical, the
Right.
engineering part of your brain, or does it all kind of tie together? Because in my mind, science is the same as spirituality, and
Right.
spirituality is the same as science. It's not actually they're not contradictory
Right. No, I
things.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, I don't see any problem between science and spirituality. To me, they fit together perfectly, and I think if they don't fit together for you very well, it's because you misunderstand science or you
Yeah.
misunderstand God. But probably you misunderstand both because we all do. Um, but like I think God invented this entire physical realm we live in. And one of the things I saw during my experience was like every aspect of this physical existence represents some kind of what I would call like an ugly reflection of a spiritual truth. And that if you could understand the spiritual truth behind all these physical concepts that we see around us, that you can understand them both better. But I don't see any discrepancy between spiritism or spirituality and science. I think they go together nicely.
Yeah, I mean, I actually used to be more agnostic, atheist leaning, and it was really when I started to watch a lot of things about the universe, like through the
Okay.
wormhole and things like that, that I was like, oh, I actually became more spiritual, seeing what's going on in the universe because it's also astounding.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's and the laws of physics and mathematics. It's
Right.
all patterns, very like amazing patterns.
Yeah.
So to me, it's all spirituality or like you say, God, source, whatever you want to call it,
Uh-huh.
created all of that perfection. Even just the
Right.
fact that I'm always so fascinated by, we call it our women's moon cycles, because we menstruate in time with moon cycles.
Hmm.
And it's like that's so fascinating in
Yeah.
itself, how it's we're part of everything to the degree that, we do have these cycles that mimic the cycles of the moon, which is really
Right.
interesting too.
Yeah. And like all these physical concepts or concepts of physics, like these laws of physics, I think they correspond to some spiritual law that maybe we're aware of, maybe we're not. And I mean, one that just comes to mind is, I don't know if you've heard of the wave particle duality of light. Like every light particle, it's both an individual photon, and it works as a wave at the same time. And I see it like, well, that's the same as the soul. Each soul is an individual soul, but then it's also got a vibration, a frequency to it. And to me, there's a parallel there, or a similarity that I think is remarkable and entirely planned.
That's so well said. Do you find ever since your experience, it sounds like you just kind of lived a normal life and you might have shut down anything, but do you notice receiving messages? You had that visitation, but
Okay.
then also do you still find yourself having downloads or visitations or messages from the other side now because you're more sensitive and aware of their
Right.
existence?
Yeah. I don't consider myself a medium, but I definitely, it's like I receive communication sometimes. I imagine it. I imagine a lot of this is from a like a guardian angel type of guide or something. Like there's times where I feel like I'm being kind of pushed away from something, or pushed towards something. Um, and then after my grandmother died, there was a couple things. Um, she died, and I didn't even know she died, but I could like feel her presence at the time. And my mom called me a couple hours later and let me know that she had passed away. But then also a couple months later, like I received a communication, and I knew it was my grandmother. And basically, she was. I had a couple options available in life, and she was basically saying, "Hey, you can do anything you want to, but this is the better option." And it was very clear what she was telling me I should do, and she was respecting my right and ability to make my own decisions. But it was clear that it was her. Like I don't even know how to describe it, but I just knew this is who was contacting me. And then when my father-in-law passed away, I really felt like I got a very simple but clear communication from him at the time. So I think I am a little bit more sensitive and able to hear some of this stuff. And then I kind of kick myself because now I recognize times when I was younger, um, when now I understand that someone had been trying to help me, some spiritual guide, or some person had been trying to help me and push me in the right direction, and I like ignored their guidance and made a mistake that could have been avoided if I'd been sensitive enough, excuse me, to accept what they were telling me, or the direction they were pushing me in. So yeah, I totally think you know we get communications like that from time to time. And I admire someone like yourself. If you can communicate better than I can and get more information that way, I think that's terrific.
Yeah, we're all mediums. We just have different levels of
Right.
sensitivity and awareness to it. And I recently taught a class on how to do it, and
Okay.
and then paired everybody up. Some people had some innate abilities and they'd never tried it before. They'd actually seen spirit. Some people had no experience. And I paired them all up, and every single one of them was able to do a reading for the other just by being aware of how to do it. And
Right.
so it's a matter of faith, belief. And then of course everyone's brain works differently. Some people are more sensitive,
Yeah.
so some are more logical, some are less empathic, and I think that has to do that kind of dictates how well you can do it and receive and communicate
Hmm.
clearly. But we're all able to, but I do notice that people whose souls have left, they remember who they are, and that's why they're closer to it.
Okay.
Now, do you have any oh, yeah, I was gonna say what you were gonna say.
Oh, I really like that. We're all mediums. That's a really good point. We're all
We're all
receiving.
souls.
Yeah, we're all souls, and we're all receiving communications, whether we realize it or not. And I really like that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I was also gonna ask you, um, I forget what question I had, but it'll come back to me. Having had this experience, do you fear death at all now?
No, no,
Yeah.
definitely not. The only thing I fear is my own ability to hurt other people or make mistakes. I realize that I'm capable of doing dumb stuff or hurting other people, and I don't want to. I realize the spiritual downside of that, and I don't want to. I don't want to get angry and hurt anybody or anything like that. That's the only thing I fear. But death, I got a glimpse of it, and um, I feel like if you live life remotely like you're supposed to, and you just kind of try to be a decent person, like you have a nice spiritual future, and we don't need to fear death at all. It's definitely not something I fear.
Right. I fear only losing other people I love, but not myself crossing over.
Right.
I know what my question was. When you came back into your body, you were told, "Hey, you're not supposed to hey, get out of here. You're not supposed to be here." Sort of
Right.
like it was a mistake. Do you have any insight now as to why this might have happened to you?
Uh, I think. I mean, I'm kind of reaching here, but I kind of think I was a little bit spiritually rebellious or rebellious as a spirit.
Mhm.
Um, like maybe I wasn't exactly where I should be as a spirit evolving into our our true self or our higher enlightenment. Um, I think that was part of it, and then part of it I'm kind of confused by because I feel like I caught my guides off guard. Like they didn't realize that I was going to leave my body at that point, but I don't think I caught God off guard. So I'm kind of confused.
Yeah.
Like it's like God knows all this stuff, but I don't think our guides necessarily have that level of knowledge, even though they communicate with God more easily than we do. So I don't exactly understand how that worked, or why this happened to me. But
Yeah, it sounds like I like that answer that your soul was sort of rebellious. I think, do you happen to remember or know if your birth was at all complicated or was it easy and you came out fine?
it was a relatively easy birth. I remember one thing I didn't cover was I remember as a soul picking my name and and why I picked this name, which is kind of interesting. But then also my birth date. I had wanted to be born on a different day, but I was shown that basically my parents' insurance wouldn't kick in time, and so I had to pick a backup day, June 7th, 1975. And I remember exactly why I picked the date, which is I think I don't know, it's kind of amazing, but there was no complications in my birth. Like the actual birth went pretty smoothly.
I ask just because a lot of people have like the umbilical cord wrapped around their neck or something, and
Right.
so they sort of their soul leaves for a bit during their birth, and then that often leads to them having more out of body experiences as they get older. And I actually
Hmm.
know some people that that's happened to, or who are more psychic, and when they trace it back, they realize that even if it was just for a moment,
Right.
as they were being born, their soul went back for a minute. And so I just am
Right.
always curious to ask people about that. And there's so much in there. It just reminds me so much of these movies that you see, like It's a Wonderful Life, Defending
Hmm.
Your Life. These movies made about essentially near death experiences. And I always wonder about the if the writers actually had experience with it or had just heard
Right.
stories about it. But I love what really sort of cements it for me is that they all have this similar theme of choose our soul choosing.
Yeah.
I love that. Our soul choosing ourselves. And so I love that because I think life can be really difficult. And
Right.
so much of the time we all deal with self-doubt or even self-hatred, insecurities, or why am I like this, or whatever it is. And I don't think it helps when you're going through something really hideous, but it
Right.
does help me anyway to remember I chose this. So let's get something out of it. Like, why, if you're
Yeah.
frustrated, just remember this is the challenge that you chose. So now, instead of fighting against it, okay, go with it. What can we learn from it? And I know that I
Yeah.
don't tell that to people who are going through the worst thing imaginable, but
Right.
still,
Right.
it's important to remember that, you know, you didn't want to be Fabio. I don't, Fabio's not my type, but I just, nice.
Right.
I hear he's a lovely man. But it's like we chose to be the people that we are with all of our flaws and all of our problems. And there's something sort of, to me, weirdly comforting about that. Um, and I and I and I also love the fact that you saw Earth and you were like, I want to go there.
Hmm.
Because I've heard too that Earth is the most difficult place to incarnate into, and that
Right.
only the toughest and the strongest say, I want to go there because I want to experience the worst stuff
Right.
because it'll help my soul. What do you think about that and about Earth itself?
Uh, I definitely think Earth, like I don't know if this is the lowest level that it gets or as bad as it gets for incarnating. Um, but yeah, what I saw definitely leads me to believe that Earth is near the most difficult, if not the most difficult type of planet that a person can go to. My personal guess would be that if Earth is like the most difficult, that there would be other planets in the universe at the same level. That's kind of my view on things. But yeah, I I don't have any trouble believing that this is about as hard as it gets. But at the
Yeah.
same time, that also means that this is like the most benefit a soul could get. Like, there's a we should never forget that there's a huge benefit to going through these difficult lifetimes, and that we all stand to gain a lot.
Yeah. And I think that's hard for people to swallow a lot because the stuff that happens can be brutal and terrible
Yeah.
and just every day we see something horrible. But I do believe that when we get to the other side, we'll understand
Right.
why.
Yeah. uh what God had told me was that yes, it's very difficult, but it's so short. Like, from a if you think about eternity, one lifetime is just a very brief, flash, and it's kind of like ripping a band-aid off. We're getting through some difficult stuff very quickly, and then we're gonna be able to move on to a much happier form of existence.
Yeah, so when we're here, it feels like a million years.
Uh-huh.
As you said, time is not the same. It's not linear there. It operates differently. It's not
Yeah.
that there is no time, but it's very different. It's not linear. And
Yeah.
so from what I understand, souls come here because they're like, oh, that'll just take a second from my
Yeah.
perspective. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I want to have these horrible things happen, but I'll be right back. But when we're here, we're in this dense energy of slow time. And oh, okay, now I have severe PTSD and I have to live with this for the next,
Yeah.
50 years or whatever. But um it's it's just that time is all relative and it's
Yeah.
different on the other side.
Yeah. One thing I left out was that as a unintended consequence of picking this body, I had terrible acne as a teenager, like really bad, like the worst kid in the school.
Yeah.
And that wasn't something that I planned for. And the guides pointed out to me, hey, if you pick this body, you're going to have really horrible acne for a couple years, and it's going to be difficult. You know what middle school is
Oh,
like.
the worst.
Yeah, and having the worst acne in the entire school, that's rough. That's difficult. But as a spirit, looking at 2 years of difficulty, it felt like nothing. Like it's hard to like it was just really extreme how easily myself as a spirit would throw myself as a person kind of under the bus and be like, yeah, 2 years
Yeah.
is
Right.
nothing. um and I'm gonna gain, like, it helps me evolve or helps me become a better soul. And it was like nothing just to accept 2 years of difficulty, in order to progress a little further.
And now you have beautiful skin, I will say, for all of those who are
Thank
listening and not watching. Perfection. And
you.
yeah, I was born with a very large birthmark on my face, and
Okay.
it sort of defined my self-esteem for the rest of it. It still affects me to this day, only I've done
Right.
enough therapy where I love myself now and accept myself and can understand that I am not still the birthmark girl, which took me a very long time for
Right.
my head to follow after I had it removed. But the but I know that that was that in fact I'm writing a book. It's I needed for that to happen to I already was born very sensitive and empathetic, but to be the person who had no friends, who everybody thought was
Okay.
ugly, gave me this empathy that now
Yeah.
I'm able
Yeah.
to offer to other people who are now I'm a big fighter for the underdog because I
Hmm.
know what it feels like. So I may not be in that disempowered position anymore, but now I can
Right.
help other people and let them know, hey, you're going to be okay and stand
Right.
strong and you're beautiful because you're a soul. So I would also love to ask you in conclusion just what is it that there's one thing what do you want people to know?
I guess to me the most important thing is to one recognize that hey we're part of God's plan, and we're gonna survive it when our bodies die, and that to lead a good life we need to love our neighbor, and be compassionate, kind, honest, helpful, try to help people where we can. And that if we can try to live a life like that where we're just trying to be good people and help those around us, we will make this world a better place, and we will be setting ourselves up for a happier return to the spiritual realms. And so
Amen.
I would encourage anybody, you know help other people where you can, be honest, kind, compassionate, all those manifestations of love, to really try to live that kind of life, and you will be blessing yourself and others if you do.
That's beautiful, Aaron. Thank you so much, Aaron Thomas Green, for taking the time out of your day and away from your family to spend time with me and my listeners. It really means a lot to have you here. And just thank you for, again, reinforcing the title of the podcast that magic is real and life can be hard. But when we see why we're really here and we see what's really going on, it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience.
My pleasure. Thank you.